I do utterly testify and declare in my conscience that the Queen's Highness is the only supreme governor of this realm, and of all other her Highness's dominions and countries, as well as in all spiritual or ecclesiastical things or causes, as temporal, and that no foreign prince, person, prelate, state, or potentate hath or ought to have any jurisdiction, power, superiority, preeminence, or authority, ecclesiastical or spiritual, within this realm. The Oath of Supremacy, 1559. The death of Mary I in 1558 once again raised the question of succession in England. She and her husband, Philip II, the King of Spain, had no children. The throne then passed to another of Henry VIII's living children, Elizabeth. Born in 1553, Elizabeth was the only child of Henry and his second wife, Anne Boleyn. It is fitting that she was born during the opening days of the English Reformation, as she would remain an Anglican her entire life. While Lady Elizabeth was still just a toddler, her mother was executed for treason at the Tower of London. Though she grew up without her mother, Elizabeth was on friendly terms with at least some of her father's subsequent wives. She also had a series of governesses and tutors who provided the young princess with an education. Her relationship with her sister Mary was mostly consistent, though after Mary's ascension in 1553, tensions rose between the two as Mary and her supporters perceived Elizabeth might be a threat. However, as Mary neared death, she nominated her sister as her successor, despite the former being Roman Catholic and the latter being Protestant. Yet Elizabeth, upon her ascension in 1558, reverted to the Protestant policies of her father and brother. In what became known as the Elizabethan Religious Settlement, Elizabeth's parliament passed two acts, the New Supremacy Act and the Act of Uniformity. The first, the Act of Supremacy, echoed the sentiments passed by the government of Henry VIII in 1534, by which he formally broke England off from the Roman Catholic Church by declaring the monarch, rather than the Pope, was the supreme head of the Church in England. The simultaneous Act of Uniformity served to standardize the order of prayer for Anglican services alongside an updated Book of Common Prayer, as well as to institute a fine or even imprisonment for those who did not attend Anglican church services, which Roman Catholics would, of course, not want to do. Things were even worse for Roman Catholic priests still operating in England. In 1571, Parliament passed the Treason Act, which made it high treason to call the Queen a heretic. The punishment for this was death. Since the Roman Catholic Church had excommunicated Elizabeth as a heretic the year before, this placed faithful Catholics in an untenable position. Additionally, what became known as the Jesuits, etc. Act was passed in 1584. This act banished all Roman Catholic priests from England. The priests had 40 days to leave the country, after which they could either swear an oath of obedience to the Queen, or they would be considered guilty of high treason. Those harboring priests would also be punished, leading to the creation throughout England of unique priest holes, wherein Catholic priests could hide in a number of family homes. Therefore, while Roman Catholics under Elizabeth were not persecuted to the same extent as Protestants had been under Mary, out of political necessity, Elizabeth made sure to limit threats from Roman Catholics. The Reformation had made great strides during the reign of Elizabeth's younger brother, Edward VI. But during her reign, the Anglican Church continued to establish its liturgy and its theology. In 1571, the Anglican Church released the 39 Articles of Religion. These 39 articles outline the basic theology of the Anglican Church, separating it from the doctrines of the Roman Catholic Church and other Protestant churches. Roman Catholics had some measure of resistance, namely through plots against Elizabeth in the hope that a Roman Catholic monarch could be restored to the throne and England returned to the Catholic Church. One such plot, known as the Babington Plot, occurred in 1586. The plot sought to assassinate Queen Elizabeth and replace her with her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, who had been imprisoned on Elizabeth's orders for nearly 2 decades. Once the plot was discovered, Elizabeth ordered Mary's execution, ending a credible Catholic threat to her throne. Yet, even as England was establishing its religious identity as a Protestant state, and Elizabeth was enduring threats on her life and rule, she sought to increase national prestige and to assert England as a leading state in Europe. In doing so, she picked a fight with her former brother in law, King Philip II of Spain. Philip, who had reigned as King of England while his wife Mary still lived, presided over a nation at its high water mark. The Spanish had finished the reconquista of their own peninsula less than a century before. Philip now controlled an overseas empire with dominions in North America, the Caribbean, Central America, the western coast of South America, parts of Italy, and the Low Countries. Luxury goods and precious metals came across the Atlantic, stripped from the native Aztec and Inca empires. Any growth in England's overseas interests would necessitate a conflict with Philip. During the 1580s, such a conflict began in earnest. The English government authorized ship captains to attack and capture Spanish ships. This form of officially recognized piracy is known as privateering. For the Spanish, there's no difference from organized piracy. Additionally, the English began to establish colonies in North America, threatening Spanish control of the region. Then, the English threw their support behind the Dutch, who were rebelling against the Spanish in the Low Countries. Philip saw this interference as an act of aggression by a Protestant state, which threatened to weaken his vast empire. In retaliation, he assembled a fleet of over 100 ships of various sizes with the objective of invading England. In July of 1588, the two fleets met at Gravelines off the coast of modern Belgium, and the Spanish were handed a stunning defeat. The Spanish weren't entirely out of the fight yet. They attempted to regroup, but bad weather in the North Sea, coupled with a long journey and lack of cohesion between ships, caused what was left of the fleet to continue to suffer as they limped home. Though some ships did make it back to Spain, it was hardly enough to defeat the English, and Philip's dream of punishing the English and bringing them back into the Catholic Church was dashed. Elizabeth continued to reign for another 2 decades, during which time her refusal to marry or nominate an heir caused tension at court and in Parliament. Even on her deathbed in 1603, she failed to nominate a successor. Thus, the Virgin Queen, Elizabeth I, the last child of Henry VIII, died. With her died the Tudor line, and Parliament had to look elsewhere to find the next ruler of England. The Tudors ruled England for a little over a century, but only 3 generations passed between Henry Tudor's victory at Bosworth Field and Elizabeth's death in 1603. During that time, England had broken from the Roman Catholic Church, established a new church on Protestant theology and nationalist ideology. They'd started to establish colonies in the New World, and they'd gone toe to toe with the largest and richest nation in Europe. After more than a century of internal turbulence, England stood upon the brink of greatness. But would her next ruler be up to the task?